Friday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope your weekend is off to a great start. The Browns continue to bandy about names, looking for a veteran quarterback to go along with Kenny Pickett, and likely a guy that they're going to draft either in the first or second round. So let's begin today talking a little bit about veteran quarterbacks, film breakdown, video analysis. Whenever we do that, we welcome in Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. And Lance, the names haven't really changed. They haven't found a seat yet. When you look at it, what are the Browns? All these guys have flaws. Let's start there. If they didn't, somebody would have them as QB1 and they'd be moving on. When you look at the names that are associated with the Browns, who makes the most sense?
Well, guy, I've heard that they might trade, get a third-round pick for Kirk Cousins. I will always say that I think he's the perfect fit because of the fact he's in the offense. Now, if you ask me who's going to be the perfect fit of the guys we're going to talk about today, I would have to say, I don't know to say begrudgingly, but I would say either Flacco or Wentz. And because Flacco's been in the system, and because Wentz was so good early, but I also think Russell Wilson in terms of, he's been around. He's thrown for almost 50,000 yards. But I will say this. I think in Kevin Stefanski's system, a guy who doesn't have a very high ceiling can be pretty successful. Why? Because if they can stay within structure, they're guys you can win with. So obviously, if you're a team that's going to have quarterback improvise and do a bunch of things, these guys can't do that. But what they can do is they can get you into the right run game. They can make those throws, the levels throws. They're going to have to be selective. They're going to have to find a guy who can bridge it. And for me, I don't know who that is, and your guess is as good as mine. But all these guys are veterans and possibly could bridge the gap in a system that makes sense for them.
Yeah, the one thing I would say that a quarterback needs to stop doing this year, you can't turn the ball over. The last 2 years, way too many turnovers. I know they made the playoffs in 2 years ago, but last year the turnovers killed them.
Well, when you're talking, absolutely. So when you're talking, if you're not going to have an elite quarterback, you have to make sure that you play good in all three phases. And one of the best things, it's kind of redundant, I sent it a bunch on here, but you have to end every drive in a kick. And when you do that, you give your defense a chance. Special teams have to be really good. You punt the ball. You make teams go long distances. You have a really solid defense with some elite players at all three levels. So you have to play complementary football. You have to play close to the best. You and I have talked about having playmakers. But that also comes with all three phases playing complementary to each other, so you don't put one phase in a bad situation like the offense has done. The Browns have been very lucky that they've had a really good defense, even in that playoff year, because they turned the ball over way too many times, like you said.
All right, this name has been associated with the Browns. Mary Kay Cabot a couple days ago reported mutual interest between Carson Wentz and the Browns. When you look at Carson Wentz, what do you see, especially at this stage of his career?
Well, it's interesting. So you're going to see here, so Carson Wentz can make all the throws. You're going to see a little slot fade here, really good ball placement, does a really good job. What you're going to get on here is you're going to get a gamer. He's very knowledgeable. He understands the game. Next thing you're going to see, this is what I think he gives you. He gives you complementary football. 3rd and 14, don't turn the ball over. He doesn't pick this up, you punt the football. He happens to pick this one up. The reason that's a good clip for Carson Wentz is because he has to do things to keep drives alive, short throws, short runs, making sure if they have a 4th down run that he runs it to the right side, things like that, the correct side that may, So I think Carson Wentz, he was so good, MVP type level, not that long ago. So he's a guy that can make all the throws. He's a guy who understands. He can get in that empty look like the Browns like to do. He can run those levels concept. He's got pretty solid feet. His fall off has been pretty dramatic, but maybe if you get him in, maybe if you keep him within structure and not ask him to do too much, he might be a guy that's I could see why they're both interested.
Yeah, again, pretty decent arm. He can run enough to pick up first downs when you need him to. But again, none of these guys are going to be guys that you win because of. You can win with, and that's kind of what we've talked about a lot. I'm intrigued by this guy, Russell Wilson, and people will say, he's washed. They went to the playoffs in Pittsburgh with him, and they don't have a ton of playmakers in Pittsburgh either.
So one thing Russell can still do is Russell can throw a really good deep ball. So you're going to see, obviously, at Pickens, obviously the Browns have Jerry Jeudy, but he throws a really nice catchable deep ball. The one thing that Russell struggles with maybe is driving that ball 15 to 25 yards. Now you're going to see this is a classic play the Browns will run. They're going to run a counter. You get the guy in the flat, you leave the backside guy unblocked, and that quarterback's got to make a play. So he can run the concepts that Kevin Stefanski and Tommy Rees like to run. The thing that he'll have to work on is the ability to drive the ball on those high lows in the middle of the field, on those dig routes, those curl routes, even the deep comebacks on the outside. He can show that he can do that. Now, he throws with good anticipation, and you're right. He did it in Pittsburgh where they don't have offensively, they don't have a ton of talent either. So there's something to be said about him. He's my guy that I'm least favorite in just because of his inability to drive the ball 15 to 25 yards. However, if he comes in and shows he can do that, maybe with proper footwork, again, who's a guy who's been there, been to a lot of Pro Bowls, so a guy that the Browns absolutely have to look at.
Yeah, and again, the Browns have talked to him. He's been in for a visit. Apparently, he's leaning towards the Giants. If the Giants decide they want him, that's his preference. We'll see. Third name, Browns fans love. The one thing I've said, I have that disclaimer that you have when you're investing. You know, prior performance is not an indication of future success, and that's Joe Flacco.
Well, I agree with that. So you're going to see what Joe does. Once again, really, really good timing, throws the ball on time. Cooper had a really good year, especially at the end of that year when he was there. Then you're going to see him on these crossing routes. Just the level concept. Guy in the flat, guy at the second level, guy at the third level. He throws an absolute dime in there to Cooper, who scores a touchdown. So what you're saying, and I agree with. So Joe Flacco's a year older. Now is he a guy that can bridge the gap and make the throws? Yes. But that year they had an elite defense, and he turned the ball over a ton. And that defense has not been as good as it was that year. That was a generational type defense for the first 6 to 8 weeks that year. So really, really good defense he had. They played good special teams that year. If he come back, he'd have to protect the football a little bit. Now, again, you're a year older, a year of taking more pounding. Maybe lose a little bit of arm strength, a little bit of arm talent. So this is a guy you can win with, though. A guy who seems to be a great teammate, a guy who seems to make all the right calls. He would have to be adequate, right? Again, a guy you can win with, not because of.
And I'm not saying that I'm against signing Joe Flacco. I'm just cautioning Browns fans. What you saw a couple years ago, don't expect that from Joe Flacco. I was shocked by that, and I was all for bringing Joe Flacco in. He played really well. It would be interesting to see, could he continue to play at that level with Kevin Stefanski?
Well, I think, there's a great example of what I was saying, even with Carson Wentz and Russell Wilson. So when you're within this structured system, and I've talked to this ad nauseum about what a structured system is. It means they're not improvising. It means they're not a lot of things on the run. They are going with how they learned it in the playbook, right? How they went through the walkthrough, how they went through team on air, and then finally how they got to it in the game. It's not there's 1, 2, 3, check down, get the ball out, throw the ball away. So that's what this system does for a guy who maybe lacks some skills or is maybe a little bit older or maybe doesn't have arm strength or whatever it may be. If you play within the structure and you do what the plays are designed to do, you can make up for lack of arm strength by anticipation. You can make up by certain things by being super accurate. So I think Joe Flacco, I think you saw it a couple years ago what it does when you play within that system.
And again, the big name Kirk Cousins. Now, there's two things about Cousins now. They did pay him the $10 million bonus, so his salary is even if the Falcons eat some, they're gonna have to eat a boatload of it because they're gonna want draft compensation for him, and it's not gonna be at vet minimum. They're not gonna eat $29 million or $32 million of it, whatever it is. So there's a enlarged salary. Because he's not getting released, so they're not eating most of that salary, and you're going to have to give up draft compensation. So I'm not sure that that makes sense for what Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski want to do at this point.
We know there's a fine line. So for me, I try not to get too much into the salary cap stuff. I've learned so much from guys like yourself and Dan Labbe and Tim Bielik and guys who really understand how this works and where the money goes. And I am not one of those guys, but I will tell you that as a coach, you are only as good as your next game. And right now you would have to say that Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry are on the hot seat. They got away with a year where they were expected to be really good and they were really, really bad. So they're going to have to win right now. And if they think that Kirk Cousins is a guy that can come in and bridge this gap and that one of these quarterbacks is not, for me, Kirk Cousins is the only reason you don't take Shadur Sanders second. Now, I'm on a mountain by myself on that with a lot of people, but I really think that if you don't think one of these two quarterbacks is the guy, then you go get Kirk Cousins, you take Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter or Mason Graham, maybe trade down a little bit and take Graham. But you take one of these game changers, and then you live with Kirk Cousins for a year, and then you go out and you get a quarterback next year. But I don't know if you want to do that, right? Because you can't win without a good quarterback, and these guys are in a must-win situation. So they better feel really confident about who they go out and get.
Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll hear from Tony Grossi, longtime Browns beat reporter. How much pressure is the front office under to win this year? Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
We're out here busting common lottery myths by talking to real players just like you. And you, sir, what's your name? Where are you from?
Tom Burrell from Lexington, Ohio.
I'm playing Powerball. I use auto pick when I pick my numbers. Do I have better, worse, or the same odds?
Same odds.
I'd say better.
I still think worse.
Same odds.
He's got it. It's the same. Auto pick, numbers you pick, same odds. Either way, he has it. He has it, folks. He already knows. You can learn more by going to ohiolottery.com/knowtheodds.
We continue talking Browns with Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Tony Grossi, longtime Browns beat reporter, ESPN Cleveland, the Land on Demand as well, talking about how much pressure he thinks Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski, in this brain trust is under this year.
I'm beginning to believe that this mulligan that these guys received this year after a 3-14 season is a 2-year mulligan, meaning that they're in for 2 years yet. And the reasoning is, I think as an organization, they might have looked at this draft and explained to Haslam, hey, listen, unless we get Cam Ward, we're not going to find the answer here in this draft, the permanent answer at quarterback. So our best bet would be to take one, but also to fill in some of the blanks and try to acquire some assets for 2026 if we don't evaluate that one guy being the best guy. So I really think it's a 2-year mulligan these guys are operating on. They're not drafting for their jobs. I'm beginning to believe that this mulligan that these guys received this year after 3-14.
Lance, when you look at that, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I hadn't thought of it that way. I think if it was truly an organizational decision to go and get Deshaun Watson, a 2-year mulligan might be true.
Well, I think the draft will tell you, right? So the draft will tell you who they go out and get a quarterback will tell you one thing. And obviously, I think if they go out and get Kirk Cousins, they want to win right now. I will say this as a coach, and, obviously dealing with the media last 3 years, myself, really learned a lot in terms of how people think. And you guys do such a great job of what these coaches are thinking and what they've done in the past. I will say this as a coach. If Andrew Berry thinks that, if the owners think that, that's great. But if I'm a coach, I want to win right now. And I will never change my thought process that there's no such thing as okay to losing or tanking. That should never, ever come into a coach's vernacular. He can never say that, in my opinion. Now, if they go out and they draft certain guys and they don't have certain positions, maybe that's the case. But Kevin Stefanski should be pushing to draft a quarterback or whoever he thinks is the best. He should be pushing to get Kirk Cousins. He should be pushing to whatever he thinks he can help him win this year. I don't think a plan for 26 for Kevin Stefanski is the way to go. Maybe those upper brass guys, those guys who are in charge of things. But if I'm a coach, I'm doing everything I can to win everything I do. If I play you in ping pong, I'm trying to beat you in ping pong. And that's how those coaches think. And I think that's how Kevin Stefanski has to think. Losing can't become a natural. It can't become okay. It's got to be irritating. Losing's got to feel worse than winning feels good at the NFL level, at all levels of football.
Yeah, and when I say that when he says a 2-year mulligan, he may mean it differently than I do. You got to show development and a plan. The problem is you might not be able to get to 9 wins because you need a quarterback, you need a running back, you probably need a wide receiver that's 1A, and you need a tight end that's probably 1A. You need so many pieces offensively that can make plays. I don't know that you can get there in one draft. Even as deep as running back is in this draft, and tight ends are pretty deep. you still need so many pieces to get to where you need to be.
Well, that's interesting. So you can see what a lot of people don't talk about with the Deshaun Watson trade is they've been unable to kind of restock some of these positions, especially some of the depth at these key positions. And now they're going back to more tight end sets and things like that. So that's where really you're absolutely correct in saying that. Now, did they go out and they say, this is going to be our plan with improvement, with winning? And that I agree with. And you're right. There are so many pieces that are missing right now. And a quarterback hides those pieces, right? An elite quarterback can hide some of your deficiencies. And right now, the Browns don't have elite quarterback play, and they probably won't have elite quarterback play this year. But they're also not completely far off. It's depth. It's just positions of need. So I will see what happens. But yeah, I agree with that. If they're gonna say, hey, this is a 2-year mulligan, and we're gonna go out. That would tell me they're not drafting a quarterback a second because there are 3 game changers that aren't a quarterback this year in the draft. So they're going to stick at number 2. Abdul Carter makes a lot of sense, or Travis Hunter, and then you build off that.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you know what else can help hide average to slightly above average quarterback play? A dominant defense led by a really dominant defensive line. So that's as we look at that. We'll get back to that in a minute. So Cam Ward, here is a number that's pretty impressive. So 70% completion, 3rd in the NCAA, 17 touchdowns. This against the blitz. So when he was blitzed, 70% completion, 17 touchdowns, 1,553 yards, 83 first downs. He's the only quarterback that was top 4 in all of those stats. That's impressive. Those are some of the reasons why he kind of has separated a little bit, and the elite physical tools.
Well, yeah, it's 1 and 1A for me. Now, I've gone with a lot of people saying, the Browns need to draft Cam Ward because Shadur Sanders is for sure 2. In my book, I don't see Shadur Sanders as a number 2. I see him 1 and 1A. Now, when I say 1 and 1A, I would go with Sanders because he fits the scheme. Now, if Cam Ward, if they feel Cam Ward is that much better, then yes, you go after Cam Ward because you win with players, you don't win with plays. However, within this scheme, we've seen a quarterback who likes to improvise who did not do very well. So that tells me Shadur Sanders. I do those numbers on Cam Ward tell me 2 things. One is he's pretty calm and cool, and his footwork is really good under pressure. It also tells me the offensive coordinator is really good. And what they did with Restrepo and those guys down there at Miami was outstanding in terms of having an answer on 3rd and medium with blitz pickup. So they did a great job of picking up the blitz at Miami, and they did a great job of beating the blitz at Miami. So not only does Cam Ward get a lot of credit, but their coordinator does too. But yeah, it's really, really close. Cam Ward, his physical tools wow you when you watch him on film. I'm just not so sure he fits in with what the Browns want to do.
All right, this is from Chris Trapasso, mock draft, CBS Sports. He did a 3-round mock draft. He had the Browns taking Abdul Carter 2 overall, coming back and taking Jackson Dart with the first pick in the 2nd round. Travion Henderson, running back from Ohio State, with the pick in the 3rd round. Their first pick in the 3rd round. Their second pick, he had them going with a wide receiver, Torrey Horton from Colorado State. I kind of like that. I like Abdul Carter. I like Travion Henderson. Jackson Dart, I'm kind of. You've studied him more than I have. I'm intrigued because he's young, and I think there were some concepts that Lane Kiffin ran at Mississippi that would translate. Maybe not directly, but I think he has the skill set's intriguing.
Well, if you go through that draft, I like it kind of too. Here's a couple devil's advocate, I would say. So if you look at, first of all, I think anytime you go O-line, D-line, if you think those are transitional guys or generational guys on the offensive defensive line, which I think Carter has those skills, then I'm all for it. Offensive defensive lineman, I don't care where you pick him. I think Mason Graham's the same way. I've had a lot of people say, no way I'd pick a guy at 2. Well, I think Mason Graham's that good. If you tell me you can have Aaron Donald at 2, now is he Aaron Donald? I don't know. But if you think he's got a chance to be all-pro, then you take him wherever he's at. Travion Henderson is a guy that I love, but I don't think he fits the scheme. What I mean by that is I think he was my running back number 1. But the Browns need to get to 2nd and 4 more often. Talk about helping the quarterback. And as good as Travion Henderson is, and once again, he was my number 1 quarterback, I think a heavy guy, Omarion Hampton, a guy like Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, guys that get you to, they're not the home run hitters that Henderson is, but they get you to 2nd and 4. They need that guy. They have a guy, home run hitter, who's done a really nice job, and I thought he improved really, really well last year in Ford. Jackson Dart is as hot and cold as anybody I've watched in the draft. He does a lot of things. He is young. He's really good off play action. His footwork struggles in the pocket when he has to consistently throw from the pocket. And then Horton's a guy I have a little bit higher than everybody else, but he's also a guy that kind of fits the Ced Tillman, Jerry Jeudy. He's a vertical threat. He's a 4.41 guy. He had a really good year at Colorado State, but he has a very limited route tree. He's a vertical route runner. Now, he's an awesome vertical route runner, and the Browns do need a guy who can blow the top off, but that's kind of what they hope Ced Tillman can do. They need a guy in the slot that can get him easy yard, and he's not an easy yards guy. So if I had to say one thing about that draft, I would just say they need a slot guy in the 4th round or 3rd or 4th round more than they need a vertical threat. The other 3 picks, I wouldn't hate those at all, especially Carter and especially Henderson if you're going to use him as a 3rd, as a 3-down back, and Ford becomes a 3rd guy on only. But I don't know if Travion Henderson can handle that pounding. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, you bring up a decent point. He was banged up a lot until this year for Ohio State. This is intriguing, though. This is from the 33rd team. These are comps to Travion Henderson, and you got to like it. He's got size of Reggie Bush. Bush is 5'11", 201. Henderson 5'10", 202. Speed of Saquon Barkley, 40 time 10-yard split from the combine. Barkley 4.4, 1.54 split. Henderson 4.43, 1.52 split. And the explosiveness measured by the vertical and broad jumps of Adrian Peterson. Peterson 38.5 and a 127 broad jump. 38.5 and a 128 for Henderson. So those are pretty elite athletic comps when you look at them. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, those are some wow factors for Travion Henderson. To your point, though, until this year, he was banged up at Ohio State some.
Well, if you're going to make a running back in a lab, you might pick those 3 guys. You might pick those 3 guys in their skill set. Reggie Bush is as sudden as twitchy as you get. Barkley's strong. Peterson with that straight line speed and power. So those comps are incredible. And I will say this, it's more of what the Browns need. And I know you don't draft on need, but at a certain point in time, you have to start fitting things in with scheme and need and talent. And the running back class is so good and so deep this year. A guy like, for example, a guy like Omarion Hampton, he gives you a lot of what Travion Henderson does. He doesn't probably give you the home run threat, but he gives you everything else. He can run on 1st down. He's a 3-down back. He catches the ball well. Even though I have Travion Henderson number 1, if you're going back to this 13, 12 personnel, you need a big, heavy guy. You need a guy who can get you to 2nd, 4. That has nothing to do, like I said, with Henderson, because he's number 1 on my board, and I wouldn't hate if they drafted him. But, again, the idea of need versus want, if you have a guy who's similar in skill set, then go with need, because then it fits more, and you don't have to change so much. We saw what happened with Kevin Stefanski when he had to change his offense. It wasn't very good. You made a choice to stick with him, which I'm okay with. Then get him some guys that do what he does well and see what happens.
I'm with you. They need some guys that threaten the defense with the ball in their hand, and they need a couple of them. They need a running back and a wide receiver, and then let's go get a quarterback and go play. Lance Reisland, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Lance.
As always, thanks for having me.
Lance Reisland, make sure you check him out. Great stuff, especially with the film breakdown, video analysis. Check him out, cleveland.com, as well as the pages of The Plain Dealer. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Tim Bielik from The Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, straight ahead. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns and draft here on Sports4CLE. 'Tis the season, a little bit over a month away from the NFL's draft. Mel Kiper Jr., ESPN draft analyst, released his latest mock draft. Here's who he has the Browns taking at 2.
Well, people say, well, why would you take Abdul Carter when you have Myles Garrett? Why not? You need 2 of the wide nines. You need guys on both sides that can attack off the edge. Myles Garrett, hey, if he's doubled, Abdul Carter is going to wreak havoc, and quarterback's going to be in trouble when they play the Cleveland Browns. So you can say, well, take Travis Hunter, at corner, wide receiver, but passing on Carter, who is right there with Hunter as 1 and 1A on the top of the board, and you're Cleveland, and you got all these quarterbacks you got to deal with, you can say, well, I got to get a quarterback to match that. How about a pass rusher with Garrett to get after these quarterbacks? Remember when Houston, they had Carr, right? And they took Mario Williams. They didn't take Reggie Bush because they had to deal with Peyton Manning. So teams have always felt like, okay, it's one thing to have the quarterback, but we got to get after these quarterbacks. Abdul Carter is undeniably a great player. You can't argue that point. Okay, that's why I like Ursary a little bit more than people at Minnesota, because Ursary did a pretty good job against Abdul Carter. Other than that, he was unleashed and he was wreaking havoc, and he plays hard every snap, and he plays the run so well, bend, explosive off the edge. Abdul Carter with Myles Garrett in Cleveland is a nightmare. They have not had that. They've had Garrett and not anything else. Now you got Garrett and Carter. That is as good a tandem potentially as you will ever see. I mean, Garrett's unbelievable, Hall of Famer. Carter should be, Field, what are you thinking? 10 to 15 sacks a year in the NFL?
Sure would
8
think
to
so.
12 probably, and that 8 to 12, 12 to 15?
Higher.
You kidding me? Why would you pass on Abdul Carter?
With that, let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. And Tim, I'm intrigued, and we'll get into the mock draft that you did in just a minute. But I got to be honest, if you put Abdul Carter opposite Myles Garrett, it makes everybody on that defense a little bit better. Because quarterbacks, 1, you got a game plan. 2, you're not going to have as much time.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the appeal of Abdul Carter. I mean, it's not personally the route I would take, but my thought process when I evaluate guys is I always try to understand why you would be interested in him. With Abdul Carter, I think Mel Kiper's got a great point. I mean, he's the best pass rusher in this draft, bar none. He was outstanding in the playoff, particularly against Notre Dame. So, I mean, you put Myles Garrett and Abdul Carter on the same defensive line. I mean, it's really a pick your poison, because how are you going to double team Myles Garrett and consistently leave Abdul Carter one-on-one? Number one. Number two, I mean, how are you going to move things around and basically leave all the defensive tackles basically on islands? And as soon as one of them beats a one-on-one, it's game over from there. And number three, you're not just going to, the other way around all that is just go 3 steps and throw the football, and you're not going to have success doing that consistently in the NFL either, just because you can't live that way on those short passes. So I understand the appeal of that, but I think we all can understand that the defense was not the problem for the Browns last year. I talk about on my mock, my latest first-round mock coming that went up Friday morning, that this offense was historically bad. And I know there's 7 rounds in a draft, but as good as Abdul Carter is, that doesn't fix your biggest problem, which was you could not score the football in 2024. You could barely move the football in 2024. And I don't know, as good as Abdul Carter is, he doesn't fix that for you.
Yeah, that is absolutely fair. And my thought process is, in the NFL, you win with elite units. Abdul Carter has the ability to make that an elite unit, but to your point, the Browns are in need of an injection of playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. So we're going to take a look at mock draft, and I know you're updating it, and you released one this morning that's going to be a little different, but let's look at what you had here. You had Travis Hunter going number 2 overall, then Jalen Milroe, Caleb Johnson, Gunnar Helm, and Barrett Carter. So again, those are guys that threaten a defense in Hunter, Milroe, Johnson, and Helm. Those are all guys that threaten a defense.
Right, and for this particular Browns mock, what I decided to do was I wanted to go through the scenario, what happens if you don't go with Shadur Sanders 2nd overall. I mean, that's the scenario I personally would still go with, but I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of, okay, what if this doesn't happen? What do the Browns do then? And that's why I went Travis Hunter 2nd overall. I think he's the best playmaker, he's definitely a dynamic playmaker, right on the same level, I think, with Abdul Carter. And with Hunter, I know Andrew Berry spoke at the Combine about how he sees Hunter as a receiver. I don't doubt it. I think that people say there's a lot of Odell Beckham Jr. to his game. I think when you take a player as athletically gifted as Hunter, who played 100+ snaps a game, was high end, was extremely productive, both the corner and a receiver, and you have him specialize in one or the other, that's only going to make him even better going forward. So that's why I kind of went with him there at number 2 in this mock. And 33, I simply had to get a quarterback, and for me, it's Jalen Milroe. For me, he's my quarterback number 3, ahead of Jackson Dart. We'll talk about Dart in a little bit. The problem I realized with him, and that's kind of really souring me on Jackson Dart a little bit. But with Milroe, this was even before his pro day when he ran sub 4.40. I think with Milroe, any of those concerns you have about certain, inaccuracy, especially in the fourth quarter of games, I think that boils down to he needs to really hone in on his mechanics, the attention to detail, as far as understanding, you have to have your mechanics properly intact every single time you throw the football. And there were times where that got away from him, where he didn't quite have that form that he needed to have every single pass. That's something I imagine he seems like he's been working on through the offseason. And he's a guy where if you draft him, I feel like if you draft Jalen Milroe, you pretty much have to do everything in your power to not let him play the field until he's beyond ready to go. Because I feel like you throw him out there before everything else is kind of in place as far as molding him and coaching him up. I think you're kind of setting yourself up for failure instead of giving Milroe a chance to succeed when he has everything down. Also in the third round, Caleb Johnson, I really liked him as a running back. There's a really deep running back class, and Johnson is a guy who's got a chance to be a powerful guy who gets chunk runs. Gunnar Helm, the tight end from Texas, did not have a good combine. Reason for that was when he ran the 40-yard dash, he had a false start, and he sprained his ankle, and he still ran the 40 on it later on. So I think you can pretty much throw those results out with Gunnar Helm. All I've ever seen him do is be productive, particularly this season in Michigan. Texas, excuse me. The Michigan game is one that really stood out for me with Helm. And with Barrett Carter, I figure, with the questions with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah's long-term health, the unfortunate neck injury he suffered, I think you want to give yourself some cover there just in case JOK can't come back to being the same player was or anything significant. And I think Carter's a guy who's got 3-down potential as a linebacker.
So, Tony Grossi, longtime Browns beat reporter, ESPN Cleveland, just his thoughts on Milroe and the Browns.
I still think that there's enough support in the Browns building to be on the lookout for Jalen Milroe at the proper time in the draft, depending on what happens in the first round. I have not dismissed him as a guy, a developmental guy that they could end up with. We'll know a little bit more, I keep saying, when their veteran quarterback shopping spree is done. We expect them to add another quarterback. Between this X person and Pickett, if they feel, they could improve the team even with those two players, I think the chances of a developmental quarterback increase in the draft. And then they look for the best player at number 2 or look to trade down a little bit.
All those are absolutely possible. Again, it comes down to if it is Sanders, what do they think of Sanders? Do they think Sanders can be their guy? If not, then you trade back or you take Abdul Carter. Milroe, he's going to take some time. He just is.
Yeah, no question about it. I think, like I said earlier with Milroe, I think you have to do everything in your power if you draft him to sit him for as long as you can. Maybe give him an entire redshirt season as a rookie. We saw Patrick Mahomes pretty much not play until the final game of his rookie season. Jalen Hurts didn't play until towards the end of his rookie season. I know it's commonplace for some guys when they're drafted to be day one starters, and I don't think you can do that with Jalen Milroe. I think you need to let him marinate, take time, make sure everything's down in place and everything is repeatable in high-stress situations. I know it's hard to do in the middle of the season, but he can build trust in those mechanics that, when the game action is going on and everything is repeatable and effective, that's when I think you can put Jalen Milroe out there. It really puts stress on your coaching staff to be able to get that right. And it just comes down for the Browns. Do you feel like Kevin Stefanski, Tommy Rees, and Bill Musgrave, that trio, you feel like they can get it right with Jalen Milroe? If you don't feel confident in Shadur Sanders, if you don't feel confident in Jackson Dart or any of those other quarterbacks, or do you say Jalen Milroe is your guy, we're gonna just trade down 10 or 12 spots, get a bunch of assets in day number 2, take Jalen Milroe earlier than we think but everybody thinks he's going to go, and we're just going to roll the dice and see where we go from there. It's a risky proposition, but I think with Jalen Milroe, because of his tremendous athleticism, which I think puts him somewhere as a runner between Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts, it's as high a ceiling as any quarterback in this draft. It just requires your team to be patient and you to have a great plan for developing him.
All right, so it also came out what the Browns have done relative to Jack Conklin's contract. Basically what they've done is they've created $12 million in cap space. So now they have about $20 million to work with, according to Over the Cap. It's $9 million guaranteed, $4.5 million signing bonus. It moves his cap hit down. It saves him. It basically creates $12 million. So again, they got $20 million to work with, which is more than you thought they'd have at this point of free agency.
Yeah, it's some creative cap work by Andrew Berry, and what I think it does, in that tweet, it kind of puts it out there, the idea that now you have a little room if you want to sign Russell Wilson, and I think we're still waiting on the Aaron Rodgers domino to fall. I feel like that has to fall before we get any clarity on Russell Wilson, just because, if Aaron Rodgers say he goes to Pittsburgh, and then that pretty much puts Russell Wilson between the Browns and the Giants, or Aaron Rodgers goes to New York, and then does Russ want to go back to Pittsburgh, or does he want to go to Cleveland? So I think in some way it's kind of that domino effect. But for the Browns, what it does, again, it creates that flexibility. It creates rollover cap going forward into 2026. It gives you more room to sign this rookie draft class because, again, with the second pick, that's going to be an expensive rookie contract you have to take on for that four years before you have to make that termination on his fifth-year option. Just cap flexibility more than anything. And I think also for the Browns, you basically, if Jack Conklin's doesn't play well this year, if he takes a step back, it's easier to move on from him and then bring in another guy, whether it's free agency in 2026 or if you draft a guy this year or next year to kind of be your right tackle of the future.
You alluded to this a little bit earlier, Jackson Dart, and you wrote an article about it. Something that is concerning would be his fourth quarter quarterback rating. So take us through that article and what you found out with Dart.
Well, I want to stress before I go anywhere further with this that, quarterback rating in college is very different from the NFL. I believe it goes all the way up into the 1100s in college. So it's a very different number than what you're going to hear in the NFL, what you get in the NFL. So when I say these numbers, I want it to be put out there that this is not NFL quarterback rating. This is college quarterback rating. But one thing I took a look at with the top quarterbacks in this draft class, even going back a couple years, how they fared quarterback rating wise in the fourth quarter, because as we all know in the NFL, so many games come down to the fourth quarter. Jackson Dart, among qualified quarterbacks last season, 42nd in quarterback rating. He had a 151.77, completed 60% of his passes, 36 of 60 for 515 yards, 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Obviously not very good when you're in the 40s in that stat, and you compare to some of the other guys in this class. Cam Ward, 6th in QB rating in the fourth quarter, 192.52. Shadur Sanders, 32nd. Not the greatest, but certainly good enough, I think. And then Jalen Milroe, we just talked about him, he's 45th, 150.85. But again, I take that with a grain of salt with Milroe again, because he still needs a lot of fundamental work as a passer, and it seems like he's getting that. Even going back a couple years, going back to 2023, the number one guy in terms of quarterback rating in the fourth quarter, Jaden Daniels, a 247.02. That's sensational for a college quarterback. He was number one. Number 15, Bo Nix at a 183.10. He was really good in the fourth quarter, and you've seen that translate to the NFL. CJ Stroud, 28th, in 2022, 164.37. So he was pretty good in the fourth quarter as well. Now with Jackson Dart, the point I want to make is he has not had good fourth quarter quarterback ratings in 2 of his 3 years. In 2023, though, he's actually pretty good. Quarterback rating in the fourth quarter that year was better than what Bo Nix had. So he showed he can do it in the fourth quarter. But going all the way back to 2022, Dart's fourth quarter QB rating was just 136.54. That was 86th among qualified passers. That was worse than what Dorian Thompson-Robinson did in the fourth quarter of that season. So that's a pretty bad sign for Jackson Dart. And the big red flag, and where that showed up was in a must-win game for Ole Miss at Florida. Jackson Dart threw 2 interceptions in the final minute 40 of that game, where his team needed to win to keep any semblance of a college football playoff spot alive. Dart threw 2 big interceptions on the road. There was another one that was an interception that was overturned, but on the very next play, Dart threw his second interception that counted, ended the game. Now, why that matters to the Browns, we have to remember that a reason that Baker Mayfield, there were questions about whether it's going to be the long-term future of the position for the Browns. He had his own fourth quarter issues in 2021, so it would feel a little weird from a Browns perspective to have already moved on from a guy because he couldn't get it done the fourth quarter consistently, to draft a guy who more often than not has not been able to get it done the fourth quarter. So that's a reason why I just can't really have a hard time wrapping my head around Jackson Dart here.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we continue to talk Browns improving their offense through the draft as well as free agency. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
We're out here busting common lottery myths by talking to real players just like you and you. If an Ohio lottery scratch-off game has 1 in 4 odds, that means if I were to buy 4 tickets in a row, I'm guaranteed to be a winner. True or false?
I'm going to say true.
Oh, that's false.
You're right, it's false. The jackpot for the Mega Millions is at its highest it's ever been before. I now have worse odds. True or false?
True. False.
False? That is exactly right. You can learn more by going to ohiolottery.com/knowtheodds.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Todd McShay on who he has the Browns taking in his latest mock draft at number 2. This from the Todd McShay Show.
I think Shadur Sanders is absolutely in play at number 2.
Right.
And real Cliff Notes, purgatory with the salary cap because of Deshaun Watson. The cap isn't going to change next year either. They're not in the market this year or next for a big-time free agent that can come in and solve a lot of these woes, right?
Right.
They also, if Stefanski, the head coach, and Andrew Berry, the general manager, are picking this high again, if this organization is picking this high again next year and could be in a spot to draft a Garrett Nussmeier or whomever the top quarterback is going to be a year from now, they might not have their job. So there's we got to win enough now and have enough promise for the future in order to have our jobs, but what's also best for the organization. And so when we look at Shadur Sanders at 2, Stefanski's one of a handful of guys in the league that can walk into the CEO's office with a resume that says, I can do it. Right. And that's what we talked about the other day. I'm not going to go into all the numbers, the 11 wins in one season with this guy, 10 wins in the next different season with Kirk Cousins and, all the guys, but pocket passers without great arms, without great mobility, who process fast. That's Shadur Sanders. That's what Stefanski's won with.
All right, we're going to tease this, Tim. Your latest mock draft came out this morning. Shadur Sanders is the pick. What do you like about him? Why does he fit? And again, we've seen some things that he does well. He processes well. He's tough. He's used to playing with a terrible offensive line.
Yeah, and not to mention a terrible offensive line. He had no running game last season in Colorado. The worst running game in Division I college football last season, worse than a winless Kent State team in 2024. And despite all those things, Shadur Sanders was highly productive, hyper accurate, and they still won 9 games. Wins are not a quarterback stat, but Shadur played very well. Again, I've talked so many times about he didn't have a lot of talent around him, high-end talent with the exception of Travis Hunter, and still highly productive. He's not a flashy quarterback. He doesn't have the rocket arm, which I think has hurt him in a lot of eyes. I think with Shadur, hyper accuracy is not a sexy trait, but when you look at it, it's not just accuracy, but where the ball's going. Ball placement is pristine with Shadur Sanders. It's as good as you're going to get in this draft class. And I think arm talent can come in a number of different ways. Does he have Josh Allen's arm? Absolutely not, as far as arm strength goes. But is it good enough? Absolutely, it is. Joe Burrow's proven you don't need to be able to throw a football 60, 70 yards to have success in the NFL. So many quarterbacks came in without the elite arm, but they had the elite brain and the elite work ethic. Those are things Shadur Sanders has, and I think he's a guy who's going to come into Cleveland, may need to sit a little bit like any young quarterback. Probably most quarterbacks typically do come in the NFL, but I think he's got a chance to be a pretty darn good quarterback.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about skill position guys and free agents. We'll start with a wide receiver. This guy concerns me. Tez Johnson from Oregon. Here's what concerns me. He's 154 pounds. I get he's fast. I get he's shifty. Yards per route run, 2.6. Grade versus man coverage, 79. The speed isn't great, 4.5, 40. He gets open. He did have 10 touchdown catches, but man, 154 pounds, I don't know if that will play in the NFL, and people will point to Tank Dell. Tank Dell's even a little bit bigger than that, though.
Yeah, and Tank Dell's certainly had some injury concerns of his own, so hopefully, for him, he'll be able to still forge a good career. And I think with Tez Johnson, I absolutely get, those size concerns. I mean, 154 is very skinny for a wide receiver, so he would have to add on some weight. But where I think he excels in his corner, looking at his relative athletic scores, athletic testing, the 4.5, 140, not great, but still very good. But what I see with him that sticks out, his agility is elite. You're talking a 3-cone time of 6.65 seconds. That's about the 97th percentile, according to the relative athletic score database for Tez Johnson. So you're talking about a guy who can create separation lightning quick. And I think if you have the ability to get away from coverage, you have the ability to separate, there can be a place for you if you're able to stay healthy. And seems like kind of a prototypical slot receiver, maybe an early day 3 option, kind of worth taking a roll of the dice on. This isn't as deep a receiver class as we've seen in years past, certainly not as good as last year's, although last year's, I said, was a generational class. I think with Tez Johnson, certainly that shiftiness, that quickness is going to suit him well, going to give him an opportunity to have success, kind of what we used to saw a couple of years ago with Hunter Renfrow, having, a very good couple seasons, even though he wasn't the fastest guy. I think that agility matters so much because football is just not a straight line game. So, yeah, the size is worrisome, but with the quickness, I think Tez Johnson has a way around that.
All right, before I let you go, this is from NFL.com. Best fits for the remaining free agents. Quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. They go Giants. They have the Giants taking 2. Taking up Jameis Winston and Aaron Rodgers. They say Russell Wilson back to the Steelers. They have Elijah Moore and Nick Chubb coming back to the Browns. Chubb to back to the Browns will make some fans happy. When you look at that, if those hold true, what do the Browns do as another veteran quarterback? What are your thoughts?
Well, let me start with the Giants. I mean, wouldn't that be an entertaining quarterback room from a media perspective? Aaron Rodgers and Jameis Winston. I mean, that'd be months and months of great quarterback interviews you'd be getting. So, I mean, good for them if that happens. But from the Browns, I know Mary Kay put this out there yesterday on Wednesday, about, mutual interest between the Browns and Carson Wentz potentially coming to Cleveland. Now, that would be quite a full circle moment, considering 9 years ago, the Browns traded out the chance to draft Carson Wentz. That's the move that kind of really started this whole, that whole rebuild, tearing it down to the studs, those sorts of things. That kind of has put the Browns in the position they are in a roundabout way. So it kind of would be fitting almost if Carson Wentz came to Cleveland and at least competed for the job until, a guy like Shadur Sanders is ready to go. That I feel like if it were Wentz, I'd be more likely they go quarterback number 2, because you're looking for a placeholder just to kind of keep the seat warm until Shadur is kind of ready to go. Certainly Joe Flacco would make sense as an option. I think obviously, there's a lot of love in Cleveland for Joe Flacco. I've said before that, as great as his 2023 was, those underlying metrics just were not great, and it was just a matter of time before it came back to bite the Browns. It certainly did in that playoff game in Houston, but there's enough proven success there with Flacco and Kevin Stefanski's offense that you can at least get off to a good start if you have Joe Flacco as your quarterback and a veteran mentor who's a Super Bowl champion. I think that wouldn't be a bad way to go if that's what the Browns decided to do. But to me, my guess, my own personal opinion based on nothing but my own opinion, those two guys feel like if Russell Wilson doesn't come to the Browns, either one of those two guys feels like the most likely option.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I'm guessing it's probably more likely to be Carson Wentz. than Joe Flacco. Again, just my gut feeling and read of the situation from afar. Tim Bielik, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
Tim Bielik, make sure you check him out, cleveland.com. We're step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, Dalton Wasserman, PFF data analyst, co-host of the PFF College Football Show. Straight ahead, talking a little bit more about the draft. Sports for CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. Sports for CLE continues. We continue talking Browns. Let's welcome in Dalton Wasserman, PFF data analyst, co-host of the PFF College Football Show. Dalton, as always, appreciate the time. Let's start with, I know you wrote an article, one positive takeaway from all 32 teams, NFL free agency. It's been tough to find a positive note from the Browns. Very low-keyed free agency, but what'd you come with the Browns from that one?
For sure. They kind of had to thread the needle, and they're obviously hamstrung still by the Deshaun Watson contract and a lack of money to spend in free agency. But there were a couple of good moves. I think the headliner, obviously, is that they're going to continue to build this defense around Myles Garrett, right? You're talking about a guy who's one of the all-time greats there at defensive end, still arguably the best pass rusher in football, and he's certainly got a huge contract and the highest-paid non-quarterback in NFL history. But you're going to continue to build around that. And this front seven was still very good last year. They were first in the NFL in run defense grade this past season. The Browns were. They were third in pass rush grade. And now they have to build up this secondary throughout the rest of the offseason and possibly through the draft to really round out this defense. But as long as you have Myles Garrett, your defense is going to give you a chance. We've seen that for several years already. You've got some other young players who have played well lately. I think Isaiah McGuire off the other edge played well last year. And even a guy like Devin Bush at linebacker put up a good season. It was good to see him get re-signed for one more year. So I think the front seven is still the best part of this football team right now, and that's what's going to carry this defense.
So they kind of switch out Tomlinson and Malik Collins. Is that Tomlinson was better probably against the run? Is that fair? Collins not quite as big and not quite as space-eating?
Yeah, it's fair to say. I mean, you've got two different. They're a little bit different. Tomlinson holds this gap a little bit better. Collins is more of a penetrator. But at the end of it all, I mean, they could still use some more defensive tackle depth. I mean, I think it's not something that makes a huge impact one way or the other, right? You're just trying to fill bodies on the inside there. And if they felt like they could find an impact run defender in this draft, right, I think they would still look for it in the middle rounds. But at this point, their defensive line, regardless of whether it's Collins or Tomlinson, still is going to look pretty good, I think. So I think Jim Schwartz knows what he's doing with those guys up front. They targeted Collins as a penetrator in that four-down defensive front. I think it'll be a pretty good fit.
When you look at the pieces on the defensive side of the ball, we'll get to the offense in a minute, but on the defensive side of the ball, how good can this defense be, do you think, for the Browns?
They can be really good if they can figure out, the swoon that they had in coverage last year, right? I think especially at the cornerback spot where Denzel Ward, a bit inconsistent, had a lot of pass breakups, but also some mistakes. And then the other two corners as well, Martin Emerson and Greg Newsome, those are guys that they really need to evaluate throughout the summer and evaluate this year and even last year's tape about, okay, are these guys starting caliber cornerbacks in the NFL, right? Martin Emerson on the outside. Usually Greg Newsome grades a little bit higher in the slot, but everybody in that room struggled to a certain extent last year. I think they're going to be as good now as the coverage can take them because their front seven's really good. They've got a really good core of guys around Myles Garrett. They just have to figure out the coverage on the back end.
All right, so you also wrote another article, worst first-round fits for every NFL team. For the Browns, you had Abdul Carter, which a lot of people here kind of, I don't mind them taking him if they take him at 2. What kind of your thought process behind why that doesn't make any sense to you?
So I think realistically, you're talking about, I kind of had to narrow the options here too. The Browns are going to end up with one of three players, I think. Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, or Travis Hunter. Obviously, that depends on what Tennessee does in front of them. And I just think Carter fills the least amount of need when you talk about the Browns, right? Ward would be a potential franchise quarterback. Travis Hunter could fill possibly roles at both wide receiver and corner, where, as I just mentioned, at corner, there's a need in a wide receiver beyond Jerry Jeudy. It's not a whole lot to work with. So, look, would I argue with taking a player as talented as Carter if they think he's the best player available? Not necessarily. I mean, obviously, Abdul Carter and Myles Garrett as pass rushers could be arguably the scariest pass rush in the league. To me, it's just right now having either a franchise quarterback like Cam Ward or a player who could help you on both sides of the ball at the skill positions in Travis Hunter would improve your team more in the immediate future.
So I'm going to make you Andrew Berry. If you're Andrew Berry, what are you doing at 2? We'll start with, what are you doing at 2, assuming Cam Ward is there? What are you doing at 2 if Cam Ward is taken at 1?
If Cam Ward is taken at 1, which right now I think is the more likely scenario, I would probably lean towards Travis Hunter. I think he's the best football player in this draft. He's so unique. We've really never seen anybody do what he did last year at the college level at Colorado, playing an elite level at corner, playing an elite level at receiver. The fact that there's even a chance that he could do both in the NFL is something you have to take a chance on. And we heard Andrew Berry at the Combine talk about, okay, maybe I lean in on this guy being a receiver and a potential top flight Justin Jefferson type of receiver in the league. The Browns don't have that on their roster currently. I like Jerry Jeudy. He's coming off his best year, had a lot of volume that helped that. I think to complement Jeudy on the inside with Travis Hunter out on the outside with his talents at receiver, if he feels just at receiver he's that caliber of player, I think it's worth taking. And then if you add any value at cornerback, even if it's in an emergency situation or a part-time sort of situation, I think Hunter's got immense value if he gets any value on both sides of the ball. But the fact that Berry really designated him in his mind as a receiver at the Combine makes me very interested to see if he would take him that high.
So while we're on that subject, we'll come back to Cam Ward in a minute because I want to get a thought on him. Take a look at this. This has been depressing Browns fans all week when I've shown it. These are the skill position players who are under contract who have made somewhat significant stats, at least, in the NFL. You got Kenny Pickett, Deshaun Watson not expected to play, so you got Kenny Pickett as the lone quarterback. You got Jerome Ford and Pierre Strong. Those guys have not really had a lot of success in the NFL. Jerry Jeudy had a great year. Cedric Tillman missed the last 6-7 games with a concussion. David Bell hadn't done much. Jamari Thrash would be on that, but again, didn't play a lot. David Njoku banged up and really, after having a pretty good year, didn't have a great year. There's not a lot of guys that if I'm a defensive coordinator, I look at that and there isn't anybody that I think, man, how do we take him away? There's nobody that threatens a defense. I guess Jerry Jeudy does somewhat, but I don't think defensive coordinators are staying up late at night saying, how do we keep the ball out of Jerry Judy's hands?
No, absolutely not. I mean, as currently constructed right there, if they walked in with anything similar to what you just showed in that graphic, that would probably be the worst offense in football heading into next year, right? So I think you certainly talk about if they have an opportunity to get Cam Ward at 2nd overall, I think you take that opportunity, right? I think this is a deep running back class where you can look at 1 or even 2 picks in this draft. You know, they have a lot of 6th-round picks. They have a lot of late-round picks. You could talk about Cleveland maybe even getting 2 running backs in a deep class, with different skill sets. Look at receiver. You're right. You have to find answers beyond Jerry Jeudy. Cedric Tillman showed some vertical ability last year, especially when Jameis Winston was throwing him the ball, but we don't know if that's a long-term answer. And you mentioned guys like David Bell who really haven't done much yet, or Jamari Thrash hasn't done much yet in their career. And tight end, you always want depth at tight end, right? David Njoku's a really good starter. You want some depth behind him, especially a guy who can fill in as a blocker. So there's certainly a lot of work to be done. And with the Browns having, 10 draft picks to work with, they're going to have to find some answers, especially not just the star power. We know they're trying to find that early, but especially the depth behind those guys that they see as viable answers.
Yeah, guys role players, for lack of a better term, that have a specific skill that can add to an offense. Let's go back to Cam Ward for a minute. When you look at him, what do you see? I heard a comparison, and I think it was Chris Sims said Steve McNair. I hadn't thought of that one before. It's kind of intriguing because coming out of Alcorn State, there were some questions. He was an athletic guy. Was he really a quarterback? And he ended up becoming a pretty good quarterback.
Yeah, he's a bit unorthodox in his throwing motion, and some of the comparisons I've heard, Jordan Love is one that's been brought up. And, Trevor Sikkim, our lead draft analyst here at PFF, he talks about he's got a little bit of Ben Roethlisberger even in him. He's not that size quite like Ben was, but he's got that gunslinger mentality and that mobility that can help him make throws outside the pocket. I think about him a little bit as maybe a slightly less athletic version even of Caleb Williams. I think I see some similarities in there too. But you're talking about a gunslinger. You're talking about a guy who is absolutely fearless. He's not afraid of anybody. He's been through so much adversity, 0-star recruit, 3 different schools, culminating as a Heisman finalist this year at Miami. He's not afraid of anybody. He's not afraid of any throw. Every once in a while, that can get him into trouble. But you're talking about a guy with a really good arm, a fearless player who can move outside the pocket and make throws all over the field outside the pocket as well. I think you got to rein him in a little bit, just like, again, you think about a Jordan Love or a Caleb Williams, got to reel him in just a little bit sometimes late in the play, but he takes his chances downfield. He's a good vertical passer, especially when he's got a clean pocket to work with.
What would you think it would take to move up from 2 to 1? Assuming Andrew Berry falls in love with Cam Ward, got to have Cam Ward. What would it take for the Browns to get up from 2 to 1?
I think it depends on how much Tennessee covets one player over the other, right? If they're thinking, okay, they would be satisfied with either Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders, I think they're really looking at quarterback in this situation right now with where they're at. They can't walk into next year with Will Levis as their starting quarterback. So if they value them relatively equally, that may drive the value down a little bit. If it's to get Cam Ward and they're sitting there locked in on Cam Ward and it would take a lot more, then we're talking about a higher price. But I would think, I know it's to move up just one spot, but it's also the most coveted spot in the draft. It would take somewhere between a 3rd and 4th round pick, I would think, even just for that one spot. That's usually where that goes when you're inside the top 10, maybe usually closer to a 4th round pick. But when you're talking about moving up to that number 1 spot, it really depends to me on what the Titans not only think about Cam Ward, but about Shadur Sanders. Because if the Browns are moving up to take Ward, then the Titans have to feel satisfied with Sanders, or, we haven't really heard them about finding a veteran option yet, but that could still be on the table. It really depends on how they value both of those guys in comparison to each other.
Yeah, that's fair. If it would be a 3rd round pick, I could see that being something that Andrew Berry would do if you value him that much. All right, before I let you go, PFF had this coming out, best trade asset ahead of the 2025 NFL draft for every team for the Browns. Greg Newsome took a step back in 2024, posting only a 54.0 PFF coverage grade, 120.7 passer rating allowed when targeted. He has that 5th-year option, so his price tag's a little heftier than many teams might want. What do you think they could get for Greg Newsome? And he's a guy that's played in the slot for the Browns. Someone might view him as an outside guy, and then that price tag isn't nearly as huge as it is if you view him as a slot.
Right. I do think, that's the issue is the difference in value between how teams look at slot corners and outside corners. I do think that gap is closing, but there's still clearly a lesser value from the team standpoint of, okay, if he's a slot corner only, then that's all we can use him as, right? So I think for a player that young, he's still only going to be 25 years old going into this season. He had a couple of good seasons before this past year where he really struggled. He was playing outside at a higher rate, and the Browns secondary in general just struggled. So I would assume for a player that young, it would probably take something like a 4th round pick, and then it would depend too if the Browns still have that level of faith in him, as a former 1st round pick and wanting to see what he can be at his full potential, or if they're going to really spend part of this draft overhauling this cornerback room. I think Newsome and Martin Emerson could both be players on the block if that is the case. So I do think the fact that he's got experience inside and outside, and the fact that he's still only 25 years old would make him an appealing asset elsewhere.
Dalton Wasserman, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Dalton.
Appreciate you as always, Dave. Thank you for having me on.
All right, Dalton Wasserman, make sure to check him out. PFF data analyst, always really good and insightful stuff. He is also the co-host of the PFF College Football Show. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you back here Monday at 4 on Sports for CLE.